Hello, today I'm going to be talking about Pascal's wager from chapter 5 in just the arguments. The argument in this chapter can be a little bit confusing because there are 4 separate premises and 3 separate conclusions. Premise 1 states that table 1 is true. Premise 2 states that the information in table 1 is complete. From that, we can join those 2 premises together and get conclusion 1, which says the information in table 1 is true and the information in table 1 is complete. This is deductively valid because you are just joining the 2 premises together. So if premise 1 and premise 2 are both true, then your conclusion will be true. Premise 3 says that if the information in table 1 is true and the information in table 1 is complete, then you are better off having the life of a believer and believing in the Christian God than not doing so. From this, we can get conclusion number 2, which says you are better off having the life of a believer and believing in the Christian God than not doing so. This is deductively valid because it follows the form modus ponens with conclusion number 1 and premise number 3. So, since it is in that deductively valid form, then this argument is still deductively valid. After conclusion number 2, we get premise number 4, which says, if you are better off having the life of a believer and believing in the Christian God than not doing so, then you logically should choose the Christian kind of life and believe in God. From this, we get conclusion number 3, which says, you logically should choose the Christian kind of life and believe in God. This follows the form modus ponens with conclusion number 2 and premise 4. So, if this argument also follows the form of modus ponens, then the whole argument is deductively valid, because even though there are steps and multiple arguments within this one big argument, they all still follow a form of deductively valid reasoning, so the whole argument is valid. You have just seen table 1. From this table, you can notice that this argument presents 4 different possibilities or scenarios that involve the existence of God and believing in God. The first one is God exists and you believe in God. If God exists and you believe in God, then you gain everything. You have eternal life with Him and happiness, and you lose nothing. However, if you don't believe in God and God does exist, then you gain nothing and you lose everything. You spend eternity in hell with pain. And then if we look at the possibilities where God doesn't exist, if you believe in God and God doesn't exist, you gain nothing but lose small or next to nothing. The only thing is that you live a life and you may not have been able to experience all the earthly pleasures like people who didn't believe in God. Then that leads us to you not believing in God and God not existing. You gain nothing and you lose nothing. You can do whatever you want. You experience no punishment or no eternal life or anything. It just stays the same. Because of this, we can see that the net gain for believing in God is much higher than anything else. Because if we don't believe in God, then we either experience eternal pain or nothing happens. But if we believe in God, we either maybe lose a couple earthly pleasures that we wish we had, or we have eternity with God. And that outweighs the negative outcomes. So it is in our self-interest to believe in God, even if He doesn't exist. So this proves that, yes, belief in God may be reasonable, but that's what this argument is explaining. This argument by Blaise Pascal is not an argument about whether God exists or not. It is about self-interest, or a prudential argument, which focuses on what will benefit you as an individual. If you believe in God, you lose almost nothing whether He exists or not, but you can have the possibility to gain everything. This leads me to some objections about this argument. There are 2 main objections about this argument. The first one is, if you believe in God, you want the infinite benefits, like infinite happiness and eternal life. But then you are believing for the wrong reason and you will not reap all the benefits that you want to. You can't just tell someone to believe and then they decide to believe because they want that happiness. The second objection is, what if there is a God that is not the Christian God? Then the table is flawed, because this table only focuses on the Christian God. However, if you think that the argument is false, then one of the premises have to be false for the conclusion to be false. This leads to mainly premise 2 being false, because there is not truth and it is not complete, because it does not have all the possibilities. It only has the possibilities of there being a Christian God. But what if there is a Muslim God or a Sikh or Hindu God? Then you have multiple different possibilities and multiple different tables. And this one is not complete and it doesn't show all the true possibilities. Because of one of these premises being false, that would lead us to believe that premise 3 is false, because it relies on premise 1 and premise 2 and their truth. And finally, I do believe that this argument is relevant, and I do accept this conclusion, because not only am I a Christian, but it is relevant to me because Christianity is one of the dominant religions in the world. And if this table is true, then the possibility of God existing doesn't really matter, but it's in my self-interest to believe that he does exist so that I may reap those benefits and live out a life of Christ. Thank you for watching my core assessment video.